Chapter 7. Disaster in the East. There were fewer and fewer Jews on the street of Wittlich. Ever since Kristallnacht, their situation had been growing worse. Jewish businesses had been closed or taken over by Aryans. Wittlich's synagogue was made into a prisoner of war camp. Now there was talk that all the town's Jews would be deported to the east. Like most other Hitler Youth members, Alphonse paid little attention to the way Jews were treated. In the SS newspaper, Das Schwarzkorps, which hung in the post office wall, he read stories that told how the Jews tried constantly to corrupt good Germans. Still, he couldn't see how they posed any real threat to the fatherland. Frau Arman, mother of Alphonse's former friend Heinz, was still in Wittlich. But when he passed her on the street, he tried not to speak to her. It wasn't good for a Hitler Youth member to be seen talking to a Jew. One cold November evening, to his great surprise, his grandmother called him into the milk house after all the dairy customers had left. There stood a very nervous Frau Arman. She looked small and frail. In the time since Heinz had been sent to his uncle's, Frau Arman's hair had turned completely gray. "I'm glad it's finally over, Frau Heck," she said to my grandmother. "Maybe we'll get some peace now, since they don't want us here anyway. We'll be gone in 4 days." At that, she broke down and started to sob. My grandmother reached out and pulled her to her chest. "Get out," she hissed at me. And then I heard her say to Frau Arman, "It'll be all right, Frida. All this madness is going to pass." "You really believe that, Margaret?" she asked, peering anxiously into my grandmother's face. I never did say goodbye to Frau Arman, and I was relieved I didn't have to. When I told my grandmother that Jews were being shipped to Poland to pay for their crimes by working the land, she shrieked at me in rage. "How would you like to work as a slave on a lousy farm in godforsaken Poland? The dumma idiot. What have the Ermans ever done to us?" Later in my life, thinking of Auschwitz as a farm would seem absurd, grotesque. But at that moment, it was perfectly believable to me. Until the end of 1940, there was no practical plan for large-scale killing of Jews. Hitler's hatred of them was well known, but the idea of mass murder was not discussed openly. It remained a secret, whispered only among the tightest circles of the high Nazi leaders, and then only in a very vague way. On December 18, 1940, in a speech to his top staff, Hitler hinted at plans for what he called the final solution to the Jewish question. But the main thrust of his message that day was something completely different. In fact, so shocking was his news that most who heard it gave no further thought to the Jews. On that day, the Führer announced his plans to invade Russia. What madness was this, Hitler's generals wondered. Just a year earlier, Germany had signed a non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union. Each country had promised not to fight the other. Now, Russia was slated to be the next object of German attack. The code name given to the Russian invasion plan was Operation Barbarossa. From a military standpoint, Barbarossa spelled disaster. Hitler's generals knew this. They would have preferred to conquer England before declaring war on Russia. But to this criticism, Der Führer responded calmly, "I do not expect my generals to understand me, but I shall expect them to obey my orders." In his instructions, Hitler gave the SS power to execute whole villages of Jews or other political enemies of the Reich. The struggle that lay ahead, Hitler told his men, called for the complete elimination of any groups of peoples who resisted. Chief among them would be the Jews. The final solution was taking form, but few people really understood its meaning. To a majority of Germans, the term simply meant shipping Jews to Poland to work for the Reich. Not even the most fanatic Hitler Youth leader believed that the term final solution meant extermination. We were desperate for laborers, so why would we kill people who were able to work for us? We wholeheartedly approved of Jewish slave labor. But the incredible, unbelievable order to destroy an entire race was always kept secret from the German people. Hitler accomplished this by threatening those leaders who did know about it with death if they told. And so, as the Jews of Wittlich and other towns around the Reich were deported to the east, the German people paid little attention. The government was sending them away to work in Poland. Maybe this wasn't right or fair, but the fatherland needed workers. Why not send the Jews? Nobody wanted them anyway. Early one morning, as I came home from serving the 6 o'clock Mass, the remaining 80 Jews of Wittlich, all dragging heavy suitcases, were marching to the station, guarded by a single SA man. They were among the first German Jews to be deported to Poland. They boarded the third-class railroad cars as if they were passengers with tickets. A few windows opened here and there, but nobody came out to say goodbye to them. Jews were the hated people. As the war in Russia loomed larger, the fate of the Jews was all but forgotten. What many historians now call the greatest attack in military history began on June 22, 1941, at 4:15 a.m. More than 3 million German troops lined up along a 1,800-mile front, stretching from the Arctic Circle south to the Black Sea. The 4 million-man Russian force outnumbered them. But because Operation Barbarossa came as a complete surprise, the Soviets were unprepared and unable to stop the invaders. Russia was under siege. Hitler's goal was to capture Moscow, the capital. At first it seemed like another blitzkrieg. Before the invasion, Russia had the largest air force in the world. But just 3 days after the attack began, more than 2,000 of its planes had been destroyed. By July 3rd, General Franz Halder of the German High Command was predicting victory. It is not an exaggeration when I say the Russian campaign will be won within 14 days. For a while, Halder seemed to be right. On July 21st, the Luftwaffe began bombing Moscow. With so much of the Soviet Air Force already destroyed, it looked as if the Germans would win easily on the Eastern Front. Hitler Youth members were ecstatic, wildly proud to be part of the effort. Despite the war, we still had band practice, but the Jungvolk now had other, more important duties. We collected war materials like brass and iron. We delivered call-up notices, ordering soldiers to report for duty. Occasionally, we collected money for the Winterhilfe, the Winter Help program, by jingling swastika-painted cans at churchgoers. Our favorite task was small-caliber rifle shooting, which was often the last item of training in our day-long sports festivals. In the Hitler Youth, we shared the belief that the Soviets were our key to victory. All we had to do was hold on during the coming winter and hit them full strength with the first thaw. No nation, we were told, could survive such staggering losses of men and territory as the Russians had. Then, suddenly, the campaign that had seemed like a certain victory began to falter. Time was working against the Nazis. If Hitler had launched Barbarossa in April, as he originally planned, the weather might not have turned against him. But the 2-month delay took its toll in the autumn of 1941. On September 12th, the first early snow started to fall. It was the beginning of one of the worst winters in Russian history, and it was the beginning of Germany's defeat in Operation Barbarossa. Later that month, Hitler made a disastrous decision. Against the advice of his generals, he ordered the Wehrmacht to stop its drive toward Moscow and head south instead toward the Ukraine. The German army was ill-prepared to fight in the frigid winter conditions, yet Hitler insisted there would be no retreat. He ordered his generals to push on at all costs. Back home, older German citizens followed the Russian campaign with increasing dismay, but for teenagers still held hopelessly in Hitler's spell, the setback was only temporary. The all-powerful German military machine could not falter. The Wehrmacht would rally. Until the very end of the war, the Hitler Youth remained defiantly faithful to their Führer. Our seemingly unstoppable campaign had ground to a halt before the very gates of Moscow because of the ferocious early winter. Even our highly confident Minister of Propaganda, Joseph Goebbels, admitted that the timetable had gone wrong. delaying the attack on Moscow had caused our downfall. Soon the radio blared out urgent appeals for the donation of furs and winter clothing. The Hitler Youth, including the Jungvolk, began to collect skis all over the country. My only pair went too. We didn't know it at the time, but Hitler's order not to retreat only postponed the major catastrophe that was sure to come. For the first time since the war began, the Wehrmacht was bogged down. 3 days before Christmas, my Aunt Maria was notified that her fiancé was missing in action on the Russian front. That night, as I went to my bedroom, I could hear her sobbing from the hallway. The next morning, she was at early mass that I served. That became her pattern from then on. For years, she refused to admit that Friedrich, in all probability, would never return.